Welcome. Okay, we'll get a message that it's recorded, yeah. And welcome to the webinar on Turkey and the Global South. My name is Ekrem Eddy Güzeldere. I'm a research fellow with ELIAMEP's Turkey program. I'm especially happy that we put together this webinar because it's very seldom that a topic relates to my PhD research on the so-called emerging powers, even if we have chosen a more geographical terminology. After many ELIAMEP webinars in the past months on the most pressing political issues regarding EU-Turkey relations, US-Turkey relations, the East Med, the EU presidencies, and what that meant for Turkey, this topic will give us the chance to reflect a bit more in general on Turkey's changing foreign policy over the past 3 decades. This time, different from the other webinars, it will not be live streamed on YouTube and Facebook, but it's like a normal Zoom webinar. However, afterwards, the video will be made available on ELIAMEP's YouTube channel. Having a normal Zoom meeting also means that you can ask your questions directly here by using the raise hand function, or if you prefer to write it in the chat. We have 3 very qualified panelists for this issue. The 4th fell victim to the rainy European summer. Emel Parla won't be able to join, who was supposed to give a general overview of Turkey's relations with the Global South. Without leaving my role as a moderator, I will say some introductory remarks and then give the floor to the panelists who will cover 3 world regions to which Turkey has intensified relations since the end of the Cold War, being Latin America, East Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. During the Cold War, Turkey was described as a perfect status quo country. Traditional Turkish foreign policy was described as rather passive and one-dimensional. Turkey was a front state in the Cold War, a NATO member bordering the Soviet Union, geostrategically for the West of utmost importance. For many analysts, a turning point was the 1997 EU decision in Luxembourg not to grant candidate status to Turkey. This decision made Turkey look actively for additional partners, also in faraway regions with previously very limited contacts. However, due to political and financial crises in the late 90s and early 2000s, this new policy approach only materialized with the AKP coming to power in late 2002. A more independent and multidimensional foreign policy evolved, which no longer identified Turkey's vital interests with those of the West. This was also, for example, the position of Ibrahim Kalin, who then wrote that Turkey is beginning to read history from a non-Eurocentric point of view and to recognize other possibilities in world history. For him, a process of soul searching had been undergoing. From 2000 up until roughly 2013, a shift from a security and territorial defense-based foreign policy to a more trade-oriented foreign policy at both regional and global arena could be observed. Now we look more in detail with this more active and independent foreign policy approach has been meaning for Turkey's relations with 3 world regions, and we will begin with Latin America and Ariel Gonzalez Levaggi. Ariel is currently Associate Professor at the International Relations and Political Science Department of the Social Sciences Faculty at the Pontifical Catholic University of Argentina. He is the Executive Secretary of the Center for International Affairs and Senior Researcher at the Center for Research and Strategic Studies of the Argentinian Navy. He has a PhD in International Relations and Political Science from Koç University, Istanbul. We first met, I think, in 2015 at a conference in Konya, where also Turkey and Latin America relations were on the agenda. And now 5-6 years later, again, the floor is yours. Thanks for joining, and we're listening.
Thank you, Ekrem. Thank you, ELIAMEP, for this opportunity to discuss a non-traditional issue in Turkish foreign policy, its relation with the Global South, and in my case, the relation between Turkey and Latin America. We have a conference or a seminar 3 decades ago about this topic. It will be something like wishful thinking or science fiction. But nowadays, it's a reality that Turkey has a global scope, has been transformed into a global actor in which had developed deep roots, not only in the surrounding areas of the geography, but also worldwide. And among all the regions where Turkey has landed lately, Latin America is one of them. Traditionally, I used to say that Latin America is the last frontier of the Turkish foreign policy. But I think nowadays this is not anymore a kind of a frontier. It's a space in which businessmen, like decision makers and diplomats develop such a active activities through all different dimensions, from political relations to trade, investment, etc. So if I have to summarize the main trends in Turkish Latin America relations, I will say that we have mainly three stages. A first phase of opening, especially in the late 90s until the mid 2000s, in which Turkey start to developing the first high rank visits, receiving also high rank visits from Latin American leaders, and starting also to develop a kind of a trade and political strategy towards the region. In a second phase, from mid 2000s until I would say like the beginnings of the 2010s, in which Turkey decides to take an active role in open new embassies, in trying to boost trade, also try to engage businessmen to find new routes and new spaces to develop and gain markets. And in that period, Turkey finds in Brazil the key regional partner from who signed a strategic partnership agreement and developed multiple actions from the participation in the Alliance of Civilizations to participating in the famous tripartite nuclear agreement regarding the Iranian nuclear program. So this period ends for two reasons. First, because Brazil lose slowly its start with the Dilma Rousseff administration, and on the other hand, domestic and regional problems, like in a Turkish neighborhood after the Arab Spring, the Syrian civil war changed the main tenet of the agenda. So after that, the activism that Turkey has shown regarding its emphasis on trade, its ability to develop positive relations with every Latin American country, even those who traditionally don't have very good relations, like Argentina or Uruguay, due to the pressure of the Armenian communitarian lobby. Despite all these problems, Turkey has a very positive stance towards the region. So what's going on in a third phase, especially after the 15 July, the failed coup of attempt is that the nature of the Turkish agenda towards not only Latin America, but in a general scope, has changed dramatically. The priorities changed from economy and trade toward more political and security-related issues. So struggling against FETO networks in Latin America, also trying to show a more a positive image of the country after the FETO coup attempt, also trying to balance the negative narrative that was like emanating from the United States and the European Union that is very influential in Latin American public, was part of the agenda. So despite the three numbers and the first, I would say, important investment in Latin America appears in this third phase, it was clear that the agenda was basically focused on issues that were politically related with the domestic priorities of the GDP government. So Latin America, in sum, was a space in which Turkey can can develop a global actorship, in which those main elements that makes Turkey emerging power that was received very positively in Latin America, but also in other regions, were after, in the last period, this star has lost some rights, and at the end, and this is very clear in the case of the Venezuelan, the position of the Erdogan administration towards the Venezuelan problems, especially after the self-appointment of Guaido as the president of Venezuela, and its institutional struggle with the Maduro's regime. After the position that was very clear, supporting the Maduro stance against Guaido, well, this was not so well received in Latin America. Of course, still, the United States have a lot of upper hands in the Western Hemisphere, in Latin America, and these have like negative consequences in terms of how the Latin Americans had to deal with Turkey. So still in Latin America, there is a kind of calculation about what is the position of the United States vis-a-vis extra-regional actors. So tensions between the United States and Turkey was also influenced, especially during the last years, how the Latin American perceive the activism of Turkey, and some criticism start to flow. I think many of them without so much ground, because still Turkey is a novel actor in the region, but it's not a massive influence. But of course, the position towards Venezuela and the tradition, the democratic tradition in the regions, look this approach with a negative perspective. So, to summarize the arguments, the Turkish foreign policy toward Latin America has changed during the last decade in a very interesting way, in which political and security dimensions become more relevant than those who has converted Turkey in a trading state. So the COVID-19 has, in some sense, freeze this the relation for a while, despite Turkey has donated medical equipment, etc. But as soon the situation normalizes, we will continue to see high-rank visits, businessmen delegations to Latin America, because Turkey has a right to Latin America not to go. I think this is, despite this is not a priority, it will continue to be a player, maybe not the most the most relevant, but not as irrelevant as there are many academicians things about Turkey. Thank you, Ekrem.
We thank. Looking from Turkey, we will go from left to right. So from Latin America, we will now go to Sub-Saharan Africa and have Ezgi Güner as a presenter. She received her PhD in anthropology with an African Studies minor from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Previously, she was a visiting fellow in the anthropology department at Harvard University and the Center for Southeast European Studies at the University of Graz. And currently, she's teaching critical race theory in the sociology department at Boğaziçi University. The floor is yours. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Ekrem, Eddy, Güzeldere, and Ariel, Gonzalez, Levaggi for organizing this webinar and inviting me. I'm very lucky that the call for prayer is just ended, so you will be able to hear me, hopefully. I will be speaking about the mobilization in Turkey for developing diplomatic, economic, social, and cultural relations with Africa south of the Sahara for the last 2 decades. I chose the word mobilization because, yes, this transnational process is orchestrated by the state, but at the same time, it involves the active participation of multiple non-state actors. In fact, what makes Turkey's foreign policy in Africa south of the Sahara different from other regions of the global south we are discussing today is this very mobilization of non-state actors on a large scale. And anthropology provides the perfect methodological and theoretical foundation to study Turkey's foreign policy in Africa because of its heavy reliance on these diverse actors. So I conducted a multi-sited ethnography with humanitarian NGOs, business organizations, Sufi communities, in addition to state institutions, in order to explore the ideological and material dimensions of these mobilizations. Besides Turkey, my fieldwork included Tanzania, Senegal, Gambia, and Benin. To begin, I suggest we first situate Africa within the current global moment. The decolonization of Africa failed to deliver its promises of economic independence and development. In the post-colonial era, a new cycle of dependence and debt was created and sustained by the policies of the IMF and the World Bank. However, since the 2000s, the discourse of Africa Rising has portrayed the continent as a more attractive destination for international capital. Simultaneously with this optimistic picture, there has been the emergence of non-Western actors like China, Brazil, and Turkey, among others. Critics of this international competition for land, resources, and markets have called it the new scramble for Africa, arguing that it perpetuated the colonial trade pattern of exporting raw material and importing manufactured goods. After all, the emerging countries' recent interest in Africa is driven by their growing demand for natural resources, particularly oil and minerals, as well as concerns over food and water security. Nevertheless, there has also been a synthesis of the Africa Rising and the new scramble for Africa discourses. That is, mainstream arguments about this scramble being more benign and beneficial to African nations compared to the 19th century colonialism, and that it could bring the long desired development if African leaders knew how to maneuver it. So to the international competition unfolding in the continent, Turkey entered as a latecomer in the mid-2000s, and more importantly with similar discourses. For instance, both policymakers and NGO founders said throughout my research that the 21st century would be the century of Africans. The imaginaries of national future in Turkey, furthermore, were tied up with African futures. Increased trade volume with Africa, for example, was often cited within the 2023 goals of Turkey. So if trade with Africa was imagined as a contribution to economic development in Turkey, what did Turkey promise to African nations in terms of development? Turkey's economic agenda in Africa south of the Sahara was initially shaped around the idea of creating export markets for the Turkish industries. The main actor in this early process was TUSKON, the business organization of the Gülen network. TUSKON was the umbrella organization for the local business associations spread across the country, and Africa south of the Sahara was TUSKON's area of specialization. The early emphasis on trade was evident in the international fairs organized by TUSKON. Called trade bridges, these fairs brought small and medium Turkish industrialists and African merchants together. In the face of a saturated domestic market and loss of regional markets, Anatolian business people embraced the new opportunities in African countries. For the cheap products they produced in the industrial zones of Anatolia, African markets provided a timely and viable option. However, exporting cheap Turkish products did not have much to offer to African countries in terms of development. So over time, Turkey began to promote its own developmental model. Having transformed its agrarian economy into an industrial one over the course of the last century, Turkey promised to transfer this successful model to African economies. Furthermore, many African policymakers and business communities valued the transfer of know-how through foreign direct investments. Foreign direct investments would allow African countries to no longer be suppliers of raw materials, but to process these commodities locally and export them with added value. Despite more emphasis put on investment, however, Turkish investments in Africa have remained low compared to the increase of trade volume in the recent years. Furthermore, I argue that the trading state has recently become the bidding state. Turkish contractors who have lost markets in North Africa have oriented themselves more and more towards the south of the Sahara. Backed by the president of Turkey, the construction companies have lately been contracted infrastructure and other projects by African states. The relations between the Turkish state and business have therefore been a symbiotic one in the context of Africa, with of course the exception of businesses affiliated with the Gülen network over the last years. The state helps channel capital toward Africa by including business delegations in diplomatic visits, organizing economic forums where African business communities are invited to Turkey with state funds, and educating Turkish business communities about Africa through events organized by chambers of commerce. In return, business communities take active role in representing Turkey in Africa. This symbiotic relationship became evident after the 2016 coup attempt. Turkish business people were charged by the government with the responsibility of explaining the coup and asking for the support of their African counterparts for Turkey's global war on terror against the Gülen network. So I said a few things about the business community's participation in the mobilization for developing relations with Africa south of the Sahara. Other important non-state actors involved in this process are humanitarian NGOs and Sufi communities. Although the time does not allow me to go into detail, I would like to stress that I do not find the conceptual frameworks of soft power or public diplomacy helpful for understanding their motivations, actions, or their relations with the state. It is true that these religious actors' projects in the continent are aligned with Turkish foreign policy and cannot be understood without taking this state-orchestrated mobilization into consideration. In fact, soft power and public diplomacy are emic categories. That is to say, my research participants would themselves use these concepts to describe their own actions and positions. However, these frameworks reduce religious actors to the tools or instruments of Turkish foreign policy, whereas they have their own visions and projects. While situating these actors within the broader context of mobilization for developing relations with the African continent, we still need to understand their projects on their own terms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting, and without much knowledge on my side, many parallels to how that developed in Latin America over the past 20 years. As the last speaker, we have Nilüfer Narlı. Professor Narlı is the chairperson of the Sociology Department and founding director of the Center for Health, Society and Prevention Studies at Bahçeşehir University. Currently, she is conducting a research project on the Syrian crisis, gender and health, that focuses on displaced Syrian women and children in Turkey. Professor Narlı holds a PhD in social sciences with a major in political sociology from the School of Comparative Social Sciences at the University of Science or Sains in Malaysia. And through this, she was also a pioneer regarding Turkish academics in Malaysia after her less known figures like Ahmet Davutoğlu also then studied and got their major from a Malaysian university. Nilüfer Hanım will, but not only speak on Turkey-Malaysia relations, but more broadly on the wider region. Thank you for joining, and the floor is yours. You are muted.
Thank you very much for Ariel, Eddy, and the organizers for inviting me to this conference. And it led me, to go back to Malaysia and look at Turkey's relations with subcontinent and Southeast Asian countries. So the title of my presentation is Understanding Turkey's Shifting Alliances in a More Contested World, with a special focus on the Southeast Asia and subcontinent countries. I have a long presentation, but I'll try to make it very short. And, first I like to explain the scope of my presentation. As I mentioned, the special focus is on the Southeast Asian and subcontinent countries, including Indonesia, Malaysia, Afghanistan, India, and Pakistan. And then I was planning to go through the characteristics of Turkish foreign policy, but I will skip this part. And at the beginning, Eddy explained the changes in AK Party's policy. So in the first years of the AK Party rule, the policy was more Western-oriented, liberal turn. And then after 2007, there was a change in this pro-Western foreign policy. And then there was more focus on Islamic or Middle Eastern countries have become important. But when we look at the changes in Turkish foreign policy in the 2010s, we observe more focus on subcontinent, Southeast Asia. But again, here, the focus is on the Islamic countries, Muslim countries. So I think this chart can help to understand Turkey's focus. And when we look at here, so this chart tries to show the dynamics explaining Turkey's shifting alliances. Ariel also mentioned the importance of domestic politics. So domestic political dynamics, terror, religion, identity, rhetoric. In the rhetoric is, like Turkey is a global power, strong country. And then my other factor here, independent variable, is the relative decline in the hegemonic power of the US. In fact, it creates tension, but also it gives more maneuver ability to Turkey. And then setbacks in EU membership. This process started in the mid-2000s, and the setbacks continue. So when we look at this, Turkey's foreign policy shifting alliances, this is our dependent variable. And when I look at the US, Turkish relation, Turkish foreign policy, we see tension here. And I also think that we need to look at Brexit and Britain becoming a global Britain. Very recently, United Kingdom published a report explaining its new policy. We might observe more and more bilateral cooperation between Britain and Turkey. And then, so this is, let's say, one of my hypotheses, but we need to consider this factor to understand Turkey's relations with the West. And as setbacks in the EU membership continues, Turkey starts developing bilateral relations with the EU countries. So this is again a new policy. And then China is a very important factor. Turkey has a good cooperation with China, but also there are some sources of tension. And China, its success in the South cooperation is important. We need to take this into consideration. And then later on, I will look at how Turkey is going to approach Afghanistan and the subcontinent countries. So Turkey and China will have maybe more cooperation. Turkish-Russian cooperation is also an important factor. And this changed many things in the Caucasus. And the Turkish-Russian cooperation has been intensified also after the 2015 coup d'etat. There are some sources of tension, but also there is cooperation. And what we see in this picture also, Turkey has more space, more maneuver ability, and Russia has the similar pattern. And again, as I said, I will skip this part because former speakers very briefly mentioned this. And so we have limited time, and I like to move to my other chart here. Okay, and then in this chart, I try to explain Turkey's emerging and shifting alliances in the larger Muslim Asia, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and subcontinent. And here we see Turkish, Qatar, Pakistan. Recently, leaders of the countries, they had meetings. So we observed it in 2018, 19, 2020, 2021. These countries are getting together, having a meeting. And then here, what is important is alliance and Afghan peace talks. But recently, there is tension between Turkey and Afghanistan. Afghan peace talks was supposed to be held in Turkey and it didn't work. And then they are meeting in Doha. But very recently, the new task or new mission of Turkey to guard the airport, Kabul airport, creates tension between Taliban and Turkey. And so when I look at here, Turkey, Malaysia, Pakistan, Qatar, we see an alliance here. And then when I analyze the speeches of the leader, what I see, they are planning to combat Islamophobia, and they want to lead the Muslim Renaissance. And here, Sunni identity, shared core values, and cooperation in defense sector are key issues. So when I look at this alliance and India, in fact, it creates a rivalry because India isn't very happy with Muslim extremists, and India and Pakistan has a historical rivalry. So here, Turkey has good relations with India, but there is a source of tension. And then Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates and Egypt, this is another alliance. And Turkey has a tension with this group because of Turkey's more sympathetic approach to Ikhwan. And then Indonesia, and then when we look at the Minister of Foreign Affairs webpage, Indonesia is defined as one of the key partner, key player in the region. And Indonesia is going to be more competitive. So Turkey and Indonesia can cooperate, but also compete. When we look at the global trends, 2040 to US report, we see that some of the global South countries, they will be more competitive in the new contested world. So this is why I look at Indonesia, a country with more ambitions to compete. Okay, and from here, I like to look at the Taliban peace talks, Turkey and China. The peace conference between Afghanistan and the Taliban that was planned to take place in Turkey. It was postponed, and then, as I mentioned, they met in. Okay. And then this chart. And so here we can see Afghanistan in the post-US withdrawal, a complex configuration of competition and cooperation among Turkey, Iran, China, and Russia. This can be, I mean, a scenario. So what we see here, Iran, Turkey and Iran has some ethnic historical ties, and then, but also Iran and Afghanistan, they have historical ties, and the refugee issue is important issue for Iran and Turkey, Afghani refugees. And now many people from Afghanistan are entering Turkey. And China, when we look at China, China has investment in Iran, its investments increased, but China also has a lot of investments in Afghanistan and in Pakistan. And when I look at Pakistan, Pakistan again has historical ties and refugee issues with Afghanistan. Pakistan has a desire to control Afghanistan. Also, you know, Russia, okay, Russia has a concern, security concern, because of its allies. Tajikistan faces now border security problems. But what happens, Afghanistan, as you know, in the history, it's called the graveyard of empires. First, Alexander the Great failed, and then the British, and then the Soviet, and recently United States. But what we see here, this is important for Turkey's South, global South engagement. There is a cooperation and competition, and it's a very complex configuration. And I don't know how this configuration will evolve. So my aim is, you know, to bring some of the drivers, factors, and look at scenarios and try to build some hypotheses. And this is the recent Twitter tweet message from Taliban. They were sending a message to Turkey that without consulting Taliban, nobody dare to guard the airport. And as we know, Taliban is advancing, and now it is controlling around 85% of the territory. Ekrem, I can't stop here. I really rush. I have 45 slides, then I reduce them to 21, and I can answer questions anytime. But one more thing, both speakers mentioned this, Turkey's soft power policy and religious identity has an important role in this soft power policy. And also I have it in my slides. I mentioned that humanitarian NGOs, and particularly faith-based humanitarian NGOs, are cooperating with Turkish Foreign Office, and this is also an important development, needs to be taken into consideration. And we didn't observe this in the until the 2010s. So this is also a new thing in Turkish foreign policy. Okay, thank you very much.
We thank you. I will now open the floor for questions and comments. We have more than half an hour. You can use the raise hand function, or if you have your video on, also raise your hand through the video. If maybe Nilüfer Hanım, if you could close the
sorry.
presentation, then I have a chance to see more people at the same time.
Yes, right.
If there are no questions, I have several questions. So okay, then until the others are reflecting and formulating their questions, I will start with a question. Seeing also we have a former foreign minister and ambassador in the crowd, then maybe he can also comment on that. Ariel said that, I mean, a lot of embassies, consulates, foreign missions were opened in the past 20 years. Turkey now has more foreign missions than, for example, Germany, but has only a third of the diplomats. So what is your assessment in your region on how qualified Turkish diplomats are, how well-functioning Turkish embassies and consulates are, with yeah, not at least in quantity, so much staff and qualification for regions where Turkey does not have traditional relations with.
Thank you.
Answer.
Ekrem?
Yeah, Ariel, go ahead.
It's a very interesting question. And in the last few weeks, there was an announcement to open an embassy in Uruguay, hard bone for Turkish diplomacy. In general, I would say that the Turkish diplomats are well prepared to represent the country, but I think that there are some deficits. The first one is about language. Not all the diplomats that came to Latin America know Spanish. And maybe Spanish is not so difficult to learn because you have some background in French or Italian. But for example, in other regions like in Middle East was a very problematic issue because very few diplomats know Arabic. So there was a if I don't remember wrong, a report from a think tank that analyzed this issue. On the other hand, the diplomats are not the only actors, like Turkish actors in pushing the relation with the region. So there is what I usually call the Turkish soft power package that is downloaded to the different regions. In Latin America, we have CEI-UCA, we have another law agency, we have also some activities from Yunus Emre Institute. So, and I think these new institutions in terms of the Turkish history had been very beneficial in portraying a very good image of the country, to transmit the news, the Turkish perspective on different approaches, different conflicts, different issues. So when we think about Turkish presence in Latin America and other regions, we should think beyond the official ties. So this kind of soft power diplomacy has been very influential, and I think this is the for me, that's I came from the academic world. It make the difference during the last 2 decades, and this is without taking into account the soap operas. That's another, and also the tourist promotion by Turkish Airlines. That this has been the most those who have made them the better impact in terms of public opinion, and everyone knows about some Turkish soap opera or some familiar that went to Turkey by Turkish Airlines. So this is something that has impact not in the elite, but in the general public.
Thank you. If Ezgi and or Nilüfer want to answer too, but you're not forced to. So
I think this is a very relevant question in the context of Africa, because there is a general embassy boom maybe in the continent, but Turkey is by far the most rapid and numerous embassy boom contributor, let's say. I mean, I already mentioned about a sense of belatedness in terms of Turkey's participation in the international competition in Africa. So this sense of belatedness has set the pace of the Turkey's opening up to Africa, and to make up for the time lost. For example, the number of embassies, I mean, this is kind of a cliche, but it was 12 in the entire African continent. And within less than 2 decades, it's now over 40 embassies. And the goal is to have 1 embassy in each country, right? And in one of the countries I visited, the embassy was within a luxurious hotel for the last 2 years. So the ambassador there had purchased or rented a building, a new building to move the Turkish embassy. But until then, for the past 2 years, he's been serving in kind of a miniature embassy within the confines of a hotel. So this is to explain the case of the opening up, and also the ethos of self-sacrifice probably too, because the ambassador there was, I mean, he was using a language of, you know, like a sacrificing diplomat under harsh conditions for the Turkish state and nation. And this is not only him or the diplomats exclusively, but also the humanitarian entrepreneurs or business people who use this kind of self-sacrificial language, like they don't have an interest really, or they're not after profits, but I mean, this is something they do for the nation and the state.
If Nilüfer Hanım wants, otherwise.
Yes, very briefly. In fact, you know, when we look at the countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, India, Pakistan, Turkish embassies exist in these countries for a long time. In Malaysia, it goes back to the 1960s. When we look at the Turkey's relations with Indonesia, in fact, it goes back to 16th century. Ottoman time, there was a diplomatic exchange between Ottomans and the Sultanate Kingdom in Aceh, and then you know, Pakistan, India, and especially Muslims in the subcontinent, they gave support to Turkish independence war. So this is important, and the embassies are not new in this region, but there is a long history and tradition. And Afghanistan was, I think, first country to recognize the newly established republic. Again, with Afghanistan, there are strong historical ties. But what is new is, as Ariel mentioned, or other speaker, Ezgi mentioned, and I underline, NGOs, some of them are faith-based NGOs and institutes. They are becoming also tools of Turkish foreign policy, particularly in the global south.
Thank you. I see that Günther Seufert raised his hand. Please, Günther.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for also speakers for the insightful inputs. I have two questions. Or maybe, yeah, one is do you think that there is a particular difference between, or is there any particularity to Turkish policy in the global south, for example, when comparing Turkish policy towards the Balkans? Or to ask it the other way around, is there anything that bounds the policy in these three different areas together, a common discourse, a common set of actors, a common set of relations with state and civil society actors? And another question would be, I think we talked a lot of—
To whom? Your question is to whom?
Whoever wants to answer it, I don't know.
I can explain, briefly answer the Balkan section because I had it in my presentation, yes, yeah. And yeah, the moderator. Can I answer this or you like to continue?
Well, let's maybe ask
sorry,
question also.
Sorry.
Okay. Now,
and then we answer.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. The second question would be, we have talked a lot, I think, in the last few years about a more assertive Turkish foreign policy and often the use of military might. And I think there is a discussion if this policy has always been successful, but at the least we can say that this policy has widened Turkey's influence and standing in the region. And now maybe this may also play, I think we see traits of the importance of military might also in Turkish policy in Africa. But I can't imagine of any similar dimension now when it comes to Latin America or to Asia. And do you think that this combination of trade and military presence is one of the key reasons for a possible success of Turkey's policy in the regions? Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Nilüfer Hanım, you.
Yes, thank you very much. Very briefly, I think Turkey's interest in the Balkans goes back to 1990s, early 1990s, after the first collapse of the Soviet Union, a new space emerged for Turkey, and then Turkey has, again, historical, cultural, ethnic ties with many groups in the Balkan countries. And during the Bosnian War, Kosovo War, of course, Turkey provided humanitarian aid, and Turkey is very active in the Balkan countries. There is a lot of Turkish investment. This process started in the 1990s under the Özal policy. Also, Turkish activity increased in the Central Asian countries. But when we look at the increased activity in Indonesia, Malaysia, it's more recent. So this is what I can say. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so the question was whether there is a common discourse. For sure, I mean, this trade aspect was one of that. And the second question, whether there is a military aspect to this cooperation. There was the try to get more defense cooperation and military cooperation between Brazil and Turkey when the long-time foreign minister became defense minister. He was 10 years minister of foreign affairs under Lula and then became defense minister, but in the end, it didn't materialize. But maybe Ariel knows more whether there are aspects of military cooperation with other Latin American countries where Turkey has maybe now also better political relations than with Brazil.
Well, this is a very interesting question on both sides. Regarding the military cooperation, I think it's nowadays very cold. There are a lot of competitions about military hardware sales in the region. And actually, the demand is, Latin America is not a high conflict region. So normally countries renew material, buy some capabilities to replace older ones, but the market is not so attractive as other regions, and Turkey has not a long-term presence in that area. Despite this issue, their interest to sell different kind of weaponry, for example, drones, tanks. But I think at the moment, Turkey has not been very successful in that regard. I remember going to one of the defense and security, the most important security and defense fairs in Rio de Janeiro years ago, and talked with one of the representatives of Turkish military companies there that belong to the Koch group, and they opened an office for South America, and they have the will to sell, to participate, but at that moment there wasn't many results. For example, in Argentina, there was some interest about the Turkish drones, but due to some like technological vetoes that Argentina have from the UK, it's difficult to attempt this weapon. So at the end, I think in the long term, Turkey maybe will manage to sell some equipment, but it's a marathon. This is not a 100 meters like career. So I think Turkey has a long way and need to invest a lot in terms of presence, PR, etc. On the other hand, regarding if Turkey has a global South approach or not, and after researching with one of my colleagues that couldn't manage to stay with us today, Federico Tonelli, our impression is that the global South is not part of the foreign policy narrative, despite Erdogan has used the term South-South cooperation, global South, in many moments, especially in diplomatic and in diplomatic summits. But Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, South Asia are part of this vision to engage to the non-Western world. So this idea that Erdogan repeats one another, that the world is more than five. And at the end, they aim to position Turkey as a global actor. But this is a kind of projection of the regional aspirations. So I'm not, even if I write on Turkey in the global South, I'm not favoring that there is a global South approach in Turkish foreign policy. So this is a matter of discussion, but I think Turkey can develop a global South approach in that regard, especially because has a lot of characteristics that made Turkey a country that can easily transform this plethora of actions into a common narrative, underlying diversification and engagement with non-traditional regions in its foreign policy.
Can I say just one sentence about the rhetoric? The rhetoric is, enterprising, humanitarian, Turkish foreign policy. When we look at the webpage of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, we see this, and being in every corner, as Ariel says, so being a global player, but global South, it is not a narrative, yes. Turkey hasn't formulated this narrative yet, but it could emerge soon. Okay.
Thank you. I see that Yaşar Yakır.
Sorry, can I also add
of course.
Question? Sorry, because none of my colleagues mentioned the Ottoman history as a point of reference in these foreign policy discourses, and especially thinking the Balkans and Africa together, we see how some of the discourses are exported from there actually with regards to the Ottoman past. For example, Africa is imagined to be connected to Turkey, to the Ottoman, but there has been an interruption with the Kemalist regime, right? This is the official discourse, and my research participants circulated that also. And now we are resuming a lost connection. So that's the idea. And for example, if I need to give an example from the Balkans, this myth of a villager or a person who's been waiting for the return of the Ottoman, and they ask when they see a Turk, where have you been? Like, where have you been for the last 100 years? So this was, I think, this has already circulated in the Balkans and then exported to the context of Africa. Like, I heard this kind of anecdotes from my research participants. And in terms of military might, so Turkey has its largest military base abroad in Somalia, and now in Sudan, in the Suakin Island, there are rumors that there will be a new one. And our friend, our colleague Federico Donelli has written about the military competition in the Horn of Africa, and also he's recently published a book about Turkey in Africa. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thanks a lot. Yaşar Bey, please. Still muted. Yes. No.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, first of all. And also I would like to express my appreciation for the scholarly presentations that are made during this presentation, during this webinar. My comments will be more as a person. It will not be scholarly. It will be my impression from my serving in Africa and also in the Middle East. Regarding Turkey's influence in the Middle East, despite the efforts made by Turkey in this field to make itself better understood, I believe that Turkey does not know the Middle Eastern countries as good as the European countries. It is not equipped as good as the European countries, because knowing Arabic or studying Arabic is one thing. Having experts who are born and grown up there and who can make political analyses about the development there, it is something else. And Turkey does not have the second category of things in the Middle Eastern countries. Despite the closeness, the cultural and social affinity, this dimension is missing in my opinion. And in certain Middle Eastern countries, such as Lebanon and Syria, when I was at school, secondary school, and perhaps in the college, we were taught that Ottomans brought peace, stability, and justice to the Middle East, to the Balkans, and to the Caucasus. Whereas when I served 4 years in Syria and 4 years in Saudi Arabia and 4 years in Egypt, my recollection is different from these Ottoman narrative, which says that Ottomans brought peace and stability to this region. And in countries like Syria and Lebanon, on the contrary, in the school curriculum of Lebanon and Syria, it says that the darkest period in the history of Syria and Lebanon is the Ottoman period. It is taught at school. There was something very interesting that I heard a few years ago when Syrian children were to be taught in Gaziantep, opened the schools for the Syrian children. They discussed at one stage whether it should be Turkish curriculum or Syrian curriculum to be taught there. And they decided to teach Syrian curriculum, and the teachers there had to say that the Ottoman period was the darkest period in the history of Syria, and this was in a school in Gaziantep. Somebody noticed this and they said that we are doing something also, so they changed, they excluded this from curriculum. So this is as far as Syria and Lebanon is concerned. Of course, Saudi Arabia is another category because Turkey, the Ottoman time Turkey, was dealing in Saudi Arabia through a tribe which is the enemy of this Saud family. Rashidis were the interlocutors of Turkey. So Turks, Ottomans used their influence through the Rashidis that were the enemy of the Saudis. So Saudis do not like Turkey for this reason, in addition to other reasons, because they regard Turkey as a secular country, which is not something that they like very much. Regarding the Balkans, I think that the narrative of many Turkish politicians, which has the connotation of the no-Ottoman type of connotation, this caused a negative reaction in the Balkan countries. Of course, Srebrenica and the other things are a parenthesis, which should not be taken as the model of the thinking. But in the Balkans in general, Ottoman time is not remembered with the best side of it. In Africa, I served only in Nigeria in 1960s. Of course, Africa and Turkey's penetration to Africa is different from that time, but my recollection of that time was that still is, when I was minister, I noticed this again, was that Turkey's penetration to Africa cannot compete with the British English-speaking Africa and the French-speaking Africa. In the French-speaking Africa, of course, everybody speaks French, and then for Turks to penetrate as much as the former masters of these countries is not easy. Same thing is valid for the English-speaking countries. And Afghanistan is, of course, an exception, because even towards the end of the Ottoman era, Afghanistan had very close relations with Turkey. According to the United Nations UNDP Directorate General, the first example specimen of the technical assistance from one country to another was done in 1928 by Turkey to Afghanistan. So it is the very first specimen, and many things were done by Turkish technicians in Afghanistan. So Afghanistan has to be kept as a separate chapter. And distinguished speakers spoke about the Southeast Asia, and I'm sure that their assessment will be the best. These are there are advantages for Turkey to do this opening, but there are also impediments which are very difficult to overcome, and it will take time to overcome all these difficulties. This is my contribution to what you said. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One takeaway is that the Balkans have kind of entered the global south in our debate. If there are no other questions, I would like to ask one more question. You already said that, okay, we have the official state relations, embassies, consulates, the ministries, but there are other players. But until 2015, there was one dominant other player that was pioneering often these social, these cultural, these business relations. So how is in your regions the fight against Gülen or FETÖ, whatever you want to like to call it, going? And how successful is the replacing of this, at that time, quite strong and big network with other networks, and who are replacing it? I give the floor to any of the three who want to answer first.
I think the conflict between the AKP and the Gülen network has been unfolded most brutally maybe in the context of Africa south of the Sahara, where there were so many schools, right? So the responses of individual countries have been different depending on their relationships with Turkey. Some shut down the schools, some transferred it to the Marif Foundation. So there is no single, like Africa has not been homogeneous in that sense. Yeah, let me think, maybe I'll have more to add later.
In comparison with Saharan Africa, the presence of the Gülen network in Latin America was thinner. So the worst presence is in most of the countries, but there wasn't so much influential and so much populated as other regions. So in the end, in these years, the Gülen network has lost ground in the region and has been replaced by the own like official traditional networks, like diplomats doing the cultural work, the Anadolu agency portraying and publishing news. So it was a mix of like Turkish diplomatic pressure, but at the same time, the process in which the own network lost resources, lost support, previously was by the state. So at the end, today we have again, let's say, a kind of monopoly of the relations in hands of the Turkish government.
Maybe something to add is the importance of replacing TUSCON. TUSCON was very dominant in the president's trips to sub-Saharan countries. They organized the business delegation, they organized the international trade fairs. They really controlled, to a degree, the economic and commercial relations between Turkey and the continent. So transferring that to other institutions like the Foreign Economic Relations Board of Turkey, which is like a semi-public institution. It was actually, now it's under the Ministry of Economy, right? So this state effort to control the economic and commercial relations between Turkey and Africa and to free it from the dominance of TUSCON and Gülen network has been a priority and important agenda. And also like narrating the African interlocutors, statesmen or business communities, what had happened on the 9th of July 15. This official narrative of about the coup attempt, and to tell this through also non-state actors, through business people themselves, to the African interlocutors, and to convince them for supporting the war on terror against the Gülen network. So this has been a priority since the coup attempt.
Nilüfer Hanım, how is the situation in East Asia?
You are unmuted. You are muted. I see you are muted.
Yes, sorry, I'm muted. I don't have information on this, so I cannot answer the question. Now, I haven't traveled to region within the last 5-6 years, so I don't know what is the Turkish policy, especially in combating Gülen networks. But with Malaysia and Indonesia, Turkey have very friendly relations, and so I think this is helpful. Mm-hmm. But as I said, I don't know much, so I cannot answer the question. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no others having questions, I would have a last question. Mm-hmm. give the floor to all the three speakers. And we talked a lot about the past 20 years or the past 10, 15 years. How would you see the relations will develop in the next 10 to 15 years? Is there potential for a post-pandemic situation that these relations really intensify, or, as Ariel has a little bit hinted at, will they stagnate at the current level more or less? And what needed to happen that they have the chance to intensify more and reflect the rhetoric of what Turkey's foreign policy approach would like to have them? Who wants to start?
Anthropologists are not known for speculations about the future, so I'll be quiet for them.
Can I take the floor?
Of course.
Okay, thank you very much. I have shown some charts in my presentation, and when I look at the articles, the analysis I read, and based on all this literature, I developed these charts. Turkey's relations with Southeast Asian countries, cooperation will be intensified. And this is also the plan of Turkey. I think Turkey, Malaysia, Pakistan, and they have a common goal to combat Islamophobia. And then also cooperation in defense area, and also cooperation for scientific research and improving the technology in the post-pandemic era. Turkey's relations with Pakistan, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Qatar as a partner, it will be more intense. Yes, but this doesn't, and then I think in this configuration, Turkey's relations with China is very critical, and Turkey supports Chinese project, One Belt, One Road project, and so as I said, China is investing in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and they are all part of this One Belt, One Road project. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this happened by accident. Yeah, that's great sharing. Ariel, if you want.
Yes, just to add a point. I think that in the near future, we will see swift changes in the Turkish presence in the region. I think the biggest effort has been done with the opening of embassies and the development of business connections. I think that there is a kind of lack of reciprocity regarding the Turkish interest in the region. So in Latin America, we are so focused on domestic problems, domestic economic problems, besides the COVID-19, that's a layer of additional concern, in which Turkey seems to be non-appealing country to invest more and more diplomatic and economic energies. So, of course, it's not the same. For example, Chile, Colombia have a very active policy, but especially those who belong to the Pacific Alliance. But the big ones, Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, I think need to become more become more conscious about the relevance that the Turkish economy and the political position that we have in the greater Middle East for the diplomatic and economic opportunities of the Latin America. So I think for the future, we need to focus or to blame more on the Latin American countries than on Turkey.
May I say one sentence?
Sure, sure.
I think, of course, all these remarks are very pertinent, but Turkey's means to sustain what we are talking about in the future is not easy. Turkey has limitations, economic, cultural, and also infrastructural difficulties. So all these limitations will perhaps constrain what Turkey will be able to do in foreign countries. This is something that I want to mention. Thank you.
Thank you. And Günther?
Thank you. A very short question out of pure ignorance, maybe to Nilüfer Narlı, because she has here, she said both in her presentation and now again in Q&A that Islamic states, Pakistan, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Turkey have a common goal, namely to fight Islamophobia. As I said, pure ignorance. For me, it's difficult to imagine because when we look at Turkey, I think there is a reason, or understandable reason, to fight Islamophobia, as Turkey is confronted with Islamophobia both as a state, but also as the home country of Turkish migrants in Europe. And also a discourse on fighting Islamophobia may be influential and functional, and for example, in Turkish policy in Northern Africa to compete with France. But I have difficulties to imagine a kind of functionality of such a discourse for states like Pakistan or Indonesia. And therefore, I doubt, this would be the question, is this not merely a Turkey-centered project to fight against Islamophobia? And is it not, or is it really, has it really resonated? Does it resonate with the states I mentioned and with the populace in the states I mentioned?
It is not a Turkey-based, a Turkey-centered project. You know, first, fighting Islamophobia has been on the agenda of the OIC, Organization of Islamic Conference, for years and years. They organize many conferences. And why I say this, the common goal, I analyzed the speeches of Mr. Erdogan and then Malaysian Prime Minister. So after the meetings in 2019, 2020, they made common declarations. So when I analyzed these sentences, I found that fighting Islamophobia, cooperation in defense sector, and then improving science and technology and cooperation to improve science and technology, they are the common goals. And in fact, for all the Muslim countries, this issue of Islamophobia is very important. So we can say that it is a problem addressed by the Muslim countries all over the world. And they think that Muslim people in the West, because many Muslim students, they go to Western countries, Europe or United States, North America, and then they face discrimination. So they say that after 9/11, Muslim students, Muslim people, they face discrimination when they have access to education and employment opportunities. So fighting against Islamophobia is an important I would say, issue on their agenda.
Thank you very much. We would have time for one more question. If nobody raises his or her hand. I see Mr. Yakir raised his hand. Yeah, then you have the floor as the last person asking a question. If you unmute, we could also hear it.
I have a question if nobody else has.
Yeah, maybe Ezgi, you go ahead until we've solved the technical issue.
Okay, because Ariel mentioned about the medical aid Turkey provided during the pandemic, and I was wondering if medical aid has been part of the relations in general, because in Africa it's so prominent, and I'm curious to know comparatively if like the doctors are such an important part of these transnational relations in other contexts.
Yeah, my question was going to be addressed to Ayşe. May I?
Nilüfer, Ayşe Nilüfer, to me?
Yes. The definition of Islamophobia, do you think that it is the same in many major countries? For instance, do the Saudis perceive Islamophobia the same way as we, the Turks, do? And whether the Iranians are perceiving the Islamophobia the same way as we do?
I think, you know, this is a very good question, and I don't have the answer, but it's an important research topic. We need to analyze the maybe speeches made by these leaders. I don't have the answer, but it's a very good question to ask. Thank you. Maybe a student, I can motivate a student to do a thesis, because some of my students, they did a thesis on, you know, Islamophobia in Europe. But this can be a great research topic. Thanks. Ezgi, would you like me to say something about your question to answer, or you ask question to someone else?
Of course, please, yes.
Okay, thanks. This is, again, a very important question. I think sending medical aid to countries in Africa, also Turkey sent masks to some European countries, Latin American countries. It is part of Turkey's humanitarian policy. So again, when we look at the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs webpage, we see that Turkish foreign policy is enterprising, it's humanitarian. You know, this humanitarian is emphasized in many sections of the webpage, and the webpage is translated into several languages. It shows that Turkey also wants to be global. It's Spanish, Spanish, English, French, Chinese, Russian, Portugal, and I missed my slide, but in the past, we didn't have that much translation. So it shows that Turkey tries to reach all the corners of the world. Thank you. And medical aid is part of the humanitarian policy.
Medical aid to Venezuela was, as you know, was provided by Binali Yıldırım's son. But beyond this, at least for Brazil, I have not heard of it. If I don't know, Ariel, have you heard of medical aid during the pandemic that was sent to Latin America?
Yeah, I don't have the full scope of what countries, but for what I read, this was beyond Venezuela. There are other countries, I think in Central America or Caribbean, that's also received some medical aid.
Okay, thank you very much. We have come to the end. It's difficult to summarize because we talked about very different regions without having a global approach to the global South. What for sure is true for all the three regions, that relations intensified in the past 30 years, also from a very low point, and it will depend on both the domestic situation in Turkey and the closer neighborhood and the domestic situation in many of these other countries that Turkey has relations with, because many of them have also had financial, economic and political crisis in the past 10 years. Many thanks to the three presenters from the other side of the planet, up until Turkey. Also many thanks to Mariana from ELIAMEP for the logistical help, and those being in Europe and the Middle East, have a nice summer, and to Ariel, have a nice winter. Take care and see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for all the questions, for the organization.
Thank you, Ekrem. Hi, Ioannis.
Thank you. Bye.